Howdy, Marijuana Nation. Producer Shay Gunther here, back in the swing of things after a very busy and productive time last week in Las Vegas during the big industry conference. Vegas is the one time of year where we have most of our regulars all together in one place, so we rent a big-ass compound where everyone stays and records shows. Going to Las Vegas every year is one of the more exciting parts of our schedule, but it's also one of the worst places to get any actual work done, which is why we closed down publication of this show last week. I was going to try to produce our newsfeed email newsletter, but the realities of being at West shut that down. I don't really sleep much in Vegas because of the time difference, and there are so many people to see and things to do that the free space to cover the news just did not appear. As it is, this month is not a great month if you love this podcast, because we'll be shutting down again after Friday for our annual 2-week vacation. It takes a lot of focus and energy to produce this show 5 days a week, on top of all the other work we do here at MJ Today Media, and I think it's important to take a nice deep breather every 6 months or so. So we'll have shows all of this week, and then we'll be back in the new year after the break. This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by MJ Today Media, publishers of this podcast, our weekly flagship show Marijuana Today, as well as the Green Rush and Weed Wonks podcasts. When you need to know all the things about legal marijuana, you need to listen to MJ Today Media. We're locking in our 2020 advertising calendar and have just a few spaces left on the books. So if you have a legal marijuana business, product, or service that you'd like to tell the industry about, then you need to be advertising with us. Zip me an email to shay@mjtodaymedia.com to get started. That's shay@mjtodaymedia.com, with Shay spelled S-H-E-A. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Monday, December 16th, 2019, and you're tuned in to episode 854 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. We creep back into the news flow with a big headline out of Massachusetts, where late last week, the state suddenly announced that legal marijuana shops could start to sell vaporizer products again, just as long as all vaporizers are tested and newly produced, meaning no current stock will be allowed back into dispensaries. That means that there aren't any vaporizer products for sale today, but there will be just as soon as producers can get revved up and tested. Besides testing for chemical and biological contaminants, Massachusetts also requires testing labs to certify that vaporizers are free from vitamin E acetate, the main cause of the ongoing vape health scare. Good news here. Kyle Yeager over Marijuana Moment keeps the happy headlines steaming along with a pickup of news from the world of sport, as Major League Baseball announces that it will no longer consider marijuana to be a banned substance and that it would treat it the same way it does alcohol. As part of the new policy, MLB will start testing for opioids and cocaine, though it will offer players failing drug tests the ability to receive treatment rather than be automatically punished, though any player refusing treatment will be sanctioned. Pop over to Kyle's piece for more on the MLB's policy shift, which is set to take effect during the 2020 spring break season. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com. Today's final top story brings us up to Canada, where new numbers from Stats Canada shows the nation selling just over $900 million Canadian in legal marijuana during the first 11 months of legal sales, or around $670 million US. Canada legalized adult use nationwide last October, but left most of the details on how it would look up to its individual provinces, which led to a relatively slow first year of business, with some provinces setting up free market systems with private operators, while others have been more restrictive, creating province-owned entities to handle cultivation, processing, and sales. This one's worthy of a full read today, if only to click through to Stats Canada's full report. There are plenty of lessons to be learned here, no matter where you do business. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, MJ Today Media, publishers of this podcast, our weekly flagship show, Marijuana Today, as well as the Green Rush and Weed Wonks podcasts. Did you know that between all of our shows here at MJ Today Media, we have around 30,000 regular listeners, which is about how many people gathered in Las Vegas this past week for the big annual industry conference. Think about how big of a room you would need to hold 30,000 people. Then factor in who those 30,000 people are, mostly industry decision makers and people actively working to get into legal cannabis. That's who we speak to each and every day and every week with our podcasts. Podcast sponsorship works because people listen. There's just something special about hearing the human voice. Podcast listeners take action on sponsors they hear about, and they appreciate the fact that without the companies who advertise here, we would not be able to make our shows. If you want to get in on that positive brand building and action creation, then email me at shay@mjtodaymedia.com with Shay spelled S-H-E-A, and I will tell you how to get started. All right, time for the Blitz. We have some new numbers out of Michigan as that state embarks on a new fully legal adult use marijuana sales program. In the first 8 days following the December 1st opening of legal Michigan adult use sales, $1.6 million in all flew through the tillers at the 5 adult use shops currently open. That means $160,000 in excise tax and $107,000 from sales tax went into the state's bank account. It's estimated that Michigan's adult use industry will eventually tickle in around the $1 billion annual mark. Montana will start enforcing an emergency ban on flavored vaporizer products this week, which health officials announced last week as part of an ongoing storyline. This one's a bit convoluted with legal challenges, so not a bad one to open up and read if Montana grabs your attention. Xander Peters, a new writer over at Marijuana Moment, picked up on an interesting poll out of Kansas that finds that more than 60% of respondents are in favor of legalizing adult use marijuana. In all, 63% of those polled say they either strongly or somewhat support adult use legalization, with just 26% saying they were opposed. That is about in line with the national picture, if down a few percentage points, which shows that just about everyone likes marijuana and thinks there should be a legal way to buy it. Multi-state operator Cresco Labs just sold off one of its properties for a cool $50 million. The deal is structured as a lease-back transaction where Cresco is selling a facility that it will continue to operate in, just now as a renter instead of as an owner. The move will keep the company's operations moving ahead while giving it a large cash cushion to draw upon as needed. Late last week, lawmakers in New Jersey started discussions on a proposed bill to put the question of adult use legalization to voters in the 2020 elections. Both the New Jersey State House and Senate have prospective pieces of legislation that, if passed, would kick the question of setting up a taxed and regulated marijuana system to a ballot measure next fall. Both houses of legislation are set to discuss the bills today, so we'll likely be back with more on this later this week. We have an update to a storyline we've been covering over the last month or so, as the New York State Police Department first seized last month 106 pounds of legal industrial hemp as it was being shipped from a farm in Vermont to a New York City hemp processor and retailer. Hemp entrepreneurs Oren and Ronan Levy have been caught up in a hellacious process since Ronan was arrested when picking up a hemp shipment last month. This is a storyline where we have a personal connection, as the farmer in Vermont who grew the hemp seized by police is our friend Jehala Dudley, who used to work here. Today's update is the fact that the charges have now been dropped, thankfully, falling early last week, and that the Levy brothers have filed a $10 million lawsuit against the NYPD for the false arrest and seizure of a now legal product. Best of luck to the Levy brothers with this one. Wrapping up today's news is a story over at CNN by Alicia Wallace, who wrote about the new normalcy found at the nation's largest marijuana business conference, which we were out at last week in Las Vegas. The conference has been growing every year it's been held and now pretty much feels like any big business conference around. If you weren't able to get out to Vegas last week, you might want to give this one a scan. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, MJ Today Media, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the Patreon listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Jay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today.
One take, Shay. One take.